Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Irfan Ghaffar and I've been preparing students for the IBA admission test for the past 20 years at ANISSAN. In today's video, we will be discussing the IBA recent past paper cutoffs so that you may figure out what scores you should be targeting in order to secure your admission into IBA. But before we start discussing that, we need to understand how the IBA paper is graded and how the cutoffs are decided. In the IBA admission test, you have about 45 to 50 math questions and 45 to 50 verbal questions, and each of those questions carries 4 marks, which means if you get a question correct, you will get 4 marks for that particular question. However, if you leave a question blank or if you get it incorrect, you will have no negative marking for that particular incorrect answer. You will simply get a 0 on it, which means tip number 1 to attempt the IBA test would be to make sure that you attempt all questions. Don't leave any question blank. Moving forward, let's have a look at how the cutoffs are set. Now, it is very important to understand that these cutoffs in the IBA test are not pre-decided and they vary from year to year. And these cutoffs are based on 3 things. Number 1, the difficulty level of the test. Number 2, the student performance. And number 3, the number of seats available for that particular program. Moving forward, it is also important to understand that each test has 3 cutoffs. So there's a cutoff, there's an individual cutoff for the math portion of the test, there's an individual cutoff for the verbal portion of the test, and then there's a total cutoff. And in order to clear the admission test, a student must clear all of these 3 cutoffs. If he fails any one of these 3 cutoffs, he will be cut off from the admission process, which means he'll be rejected. It is also very important to understand that the sum of the math and the verbal cutoffs is never equal to the total cutoff. In fact, the total cutoff is always greater than the sum of the individual cutoffs, which means a student who has just passed the math cutoff and just passed the verbal cutoff will definitely fail in the total cutoff. So if you want to ensure that you clear the IBA test, you need to make sure that you pass the math cutoff by a reasonably significant margin, and you do the same with the verbal cutoff. Okay, moving forward, let's have a close look at the cutoffs for 2019 for these IBA tests. Now, if we look at 2019 round 1, there were 2 tests in 2019. The first test in round 1 was for the first 4 programs, that was BBA, BS Accounting Finance, BS Social Sciences, and BS Economics. And the second test in round 1 was for Computer Sciences and BS Economics and Math. Now, if you talk about the first 4 programs, the individual cutoff for the math part for all of these programs was 92, and the individual cutoff for the verbal part for all of these programs was 92. The total cutoff for the math part, the total cutoff for the BBA program was 224, BS Accounting and Finance was 224, BS Economics was 220, and BS Social Sciences was 212. This cutoff was for students who wanted to get direct admission into IBA and were exempted from the interview. There was a second cutoff for students who were not exempted from the interview, and that was naturally slightly lower than the cutoff for direct admissions. So the interview cutoff for BBA was 212, BS Accounting and Finance was 212, BS Economics was 208, and BS Social Sciences was 204, which means the cutoff fluctuated from a lowest of 204 to a highest of 224. If we look at the second test for round 1, which was for Computer Sciences and Economics and Math, the individual cutoffs for math and verbal in this particular test were slightly lower. So the math cutoff was 80 for all of these programs, and the verbal cutoff was also 80 for all of these programs. The total cutoff for direct admissions into computer sciences was 204, and economics and math was 204. On the other hand, the second cutoff for people who did not get a direct admission but were called for an interview for BS Computer Sciences was 172, and for BS Economics and Math was 188. Moving on to round 2. Now the round 2 cutoffs for the first test, which was for BBA, BS Accounting and Finance, BS Social Sciences and BS Economics. The first, the math cutoff for all of these tests was 92, and the verbal cutoff for all of these programs was also 92. However, the total cutoff for BBA was the highest, which was 224, followed by BS Accounting and Finance, which was 224, BS Economics was 220, and Social Sciences was 212. These were the cutoffs for direct admission. The cutoffs for the interview for BBA were 212, Accounting and Finance was 212, Economics was 208, and Social Sciences was 204, which means again the cutoff ranged from 204 to 224. Now looking at the last test for 2019 round 2, you could see that individual cutoffs for math and verbal were 92 each. However, the total cutoff for BS Computer Science was 228, but the total cutoff for BS Economics and Math was 248, which means we had slightly higher cutoffs in this particular test, which probably could lead us to the conclusion that this test was slightly easier than the previous test. The cutoff for the interview was 216 for the computer science program and 228 for the economics and math program. Now, having had a close look at all of these cutoffs, let's make a very quick summary of what we can figure out from these. This probably means that students who target, let's say, 100 marks in math and 100 marks in verbal will end up with a total of 200, which means they will probably clear the individual cutoffs for math and verbal, but there's a very strong chance that they will fail the total cutoff. So 200 is a score which should not be targeted. Students who target a total of 220 will probably get into any one of these 4 programs. However, students who target 240 will probably get into their first preference program, ideally through a direct admission or maybe through an interview. Having had a close look at these cutoffs, we can safely infer that a student should be targeting at least 100 marks in math, at least 100 marks in verbal, and a total of 240 in order to be sure that he maximizes his chances of getting into IBA. Now the next step for all of you should be to start practicing past papers on a daily basis so that you are able to figure out how much you are getting, and then work on your weaknesses to make sure that you cross these thresholds. I wish all of you the best of luck. Thank you.